afternoon first day.
The moment the royal guard shifted his posture just slightly, but unmistakably every whisper in the palace froze. In a world where protocol is scripture, he bowed deeper to Princess Kate than he did to Queen Consort Camilla, a gesture so small, yet powerful enough to ripple through Kensington and Buckingham like a quiet storm. Was it respect? Was it preference? Or was it a message hidden behind centuries of royal tradition?
One guard, one bow.
And the monarchy suddenly found itself holding its breath. If you love unraveling the untold moments behind palace walls, tap like and subscribe. It helps our channel grow and you won't miss any of the stories the royal reporters never tell. And hey, feel free to share this with someone who loves a bit of royal mystery. The corridor outside the state apartments was quiet in that specific royal way, where silence, dose, and tea feel empty. But charged like something important is always just seconds away. Footsteps echoed across polished stone, soft and controlled, the kind of rhythm that told you someone with authority was approaching. But no one expected this momentary exchange, so small it could have passed unnoticed, yet powerful enough to spark murmurs from Kensington to Buckingham. Princess Kate stepped into the hallway first, carrying that calm, open warmth she had become known for. She wasn't wearing a crown or a sash, nothing ceremonial, just a soft navy coat over a fitted dress, hair brushed behind one shoulder, an expression that mixed kindness with quiet focus. If you didn't know she was the future queen, you might mistake her for a woman simply going about her day. Standing guard outside the doors was Officer Hale, one of the longest-serving members of the Royal Guard. Tall, stoic, disciplined, his reputation was built on precision. He was the kind of guard who never broke posture, never misplaced a step, and never allowed even a flicker of emotion to cross his face during duty. You could set a clock by his movements. But then it happened. Kate approached, offering him a gentle nod, the kind of acknowledgement she gave to staff often, a small gesture that always felt sincere. Hale shifted his stance, lowering his head, and offered a bow just a fraction deeper than protocol required. It wasn't dramatic, not theatrical, but anyone trained in royal etiquette would know instantly that bow wasn't standard. And fate or perhaps palace irony arranged the moment perfectly. Just seconds later, Queen Consort Camilla appeared from the opposite side of the corridor. Two attendants trailed behind her, carrying folders and notes. She walked with that crisp, slightly elevated pace she often used during official business, the kind of stride that suggests she prefers to keep things moving. Camilla approached Officer Hale. He adjusted his posture again on time. On cue, but the bow he gave her was different, shorter, sharper, protocol, level, nothing more. The difference between the bows, maybe half an inch, maybe a few degrees, was tiny, but in royal spaces, tiny details are rarely insignificant. In a world built on ceremony, hierarchy, symbols, and centuries-old traditions, a bow isn't just a gesture, it's a language. And that day Hale had spoken loudly. Camilla noticed. Didn't he react outright? Dee spent enough years under public scrutiny to maintain composure, but a certain stiffness edged into her shoulders. A slight tightening around her eyes. Subtle, but unmistakable to anyone who knew her. Kate, meanwhile, didn't appear to realize what had just happened. She offered her warm smile and continued down the hallway, unaware that her presence had just set off a quiet storm behind her. A palace staffer standing against the wall blinked. Another exchanged a glance with a colleague. Someone further down the corridor shifted uneasily. It was as if the entire hallway collectively paused, wondering, did we just see that? Because everyone understood the implications. Royal staff rarely break protocol. Royal guards break it even less, and to break it publicly, in front of senior royals. That was something almost unheard of. But to beak it in favor of one royal over another, that was something else entirely. Hal didn't speak, of course. Guards don't comment. They don't explain. But sometimes silence says as much as a confession, and the truth hid behind the smallest, softest bow. He respected Kate more. Why? That was the question that slipped into every whisper over the next few minutes. As the royals disappeared down opposite corridors, staff members lingered where they stood, processing the moment like witnesses to a quiet scandal.
A few attendants whispered that Kate always treated staff with unusual warmth,
And maybe Hale was simply responding to her humanity. Some argued that Camilla's more formal demeanor kept interactions distant, so the bow reflected emotional proximity. Others wonder if Hale had grown close to Kate's section of the palace after years of serving near her team. Then, of course, there were the more dramatic theories. "That's a statement," one junior aide muttered under her breath, pretending to sort papers. "That was an accident. Guards don't make statements," an older steward replied. "Maybe they don't speak them," the aide said, "but they make them." Rumors spread quickly, bypassing the usual corridors of gossip and landing in offices where protocol advisors quietly panicked. These were the experts tasked with keeping things smooth, making sure nothing unintended reached the outside world. And yet something had already slipped, a moment caught by human eyes that would soon be carried by human voices. Meanwhile, Officer Hale kept his expression locked in that perfect guard stillness. His jaw set, eyes forward, posture firm. But behind that discipline lay a man with opinions, a man who had watched the royal world up close for years, a man who had seen Kate interact with staff in ways that often surprised them, little touches of empathy, warmth, genuine curiosity. He had also watched Camilla for years, and while he respected her title, he rarely saw the same level of openness. And so when Kate gave him that brief nod, he responded from instinct, not textbook training. It wasn't political. It wasn't rebellious. It was human, but humans in the royal world can create some of the biggest waves. Within half an hour, whispers had reached senior aides at both palaces. Advisors at Clarence House and Kensington Palace compared notes through discreet messages. One senior official reportedly sighed and said, "Of all things, a bow?" But even they knew this wasn't just a bow. It symbolized something deeper. People's natural gravitation toward Kate, her undeniable charm, her reputation for kindness. And at the same time, it highlighted the still unspoken tension around Camilla's role and public image. Even inside palace walls, admiration wasn't distributed evenly. And the public? If this moment ever reached them, it would explode. Because a monarchy may run on tradition, but it survives on emotion, how people feel about the people in charge. And right now, one royal guard had subtly shown the world which royal moved people more. As Hale returned to his standard position, he probably thought the moment had already faded. But behind those walls, nothing fades. Everything echoes. Kate had walked away with her signature grace. Camilla had walked away with a tightened expression, and the palace was left buzzing, quietly shaken by a tiny tilt of the neck. One guard, one choice, one moment that said more about the royal future than any speech could. If you ask anyone outside the palace what a royal guard does, most imagine the iconic red tunics, tall bearskin hats, and that legendary ability to stay perfectly still no matter what the world throws at them. But the truth, the real truth, is much more layered, much more disciplined, and far more human than most people realize. Behind the polished boots and ceremonial rifles lies a code so strict, so deeply woven into their training, that even the smallest deviation carries weight. And this is why Officer Hale's bow, just a subtle tilt, shook the palace. Because to understand the gravity of that moment, you first have to understand the unbreakable rules these men and women live by. Royal guards aren't simply ceremonial figures. They're elite soldiers, often decorated, trained in discipline, intelligence, and emotional control. Their job merges military precision with ancient tradition. Every movement, every step, every gesture has meaning. Their stillness isn't just about standing straight. It's about projecting stability in a world where everything else is constantly shifting. But among all the expectations placed upon them, one rule stands above most others: neutrality, absolute neutrality. A guard is not to show preference, not in posture, not in expression, not even in breath. Whether a senior royal passes by or a junior staff member, the guard must exist as a living pillar, present, alert, but untouched by personal feeling. Which is why what Hale did sent tremors through the palace walls. But before we get to why his bow was such a break in tradition, we need to step inside the Royal Guard's training environment, the world where discipline is carved into muscle memory. Recruits begin with intense physical conditioning, hours of drills, long marches, and tasks designed to test endurance. But the true challenge isn't physical. It's psychological. Guards are trained to suppress instinct, emotion, fear, and even empathy when required. They learn to listen without reacting, to observe without appearing involved, to stay vigilant without seeming tense. During training, instructors often walk past recruits suddenly, stopping inches in their faces, searching for any sign of jitter, discomfort, or favor. One flicker of reaction, and they're corrected. One misstep, and they repeat the drill over and over. They memorize bow angles, timing, posture, response patterns. They learn how to offer the exact same gesture to every royal. Same depth, same timing, same rhythm. It's not robotic. It's ritual. It's heritage. Now imagine a man like Hale, a veteran, someone who had spent years training, serving, guarding, someone who had internalized these rules until they lived in his bones, someone who had greeted hundreds, maybe thousands, of royal figures without ever breaking professionalism. And then this moment, a shift, a deeper bow, and not to a monarch, not to a sovereign, but to a princess. The Royal Guard Code doesn't allow for spontaneous sentiment. So the question becomes, what makes a man trained to be neutral break centuries of discipline? To get closer to that answer, we have to explore another part of the Guard's world, something rarely spoken about, yet heavily felt: respect hierarchy. Royal Guards don't just protect bodies. They embody tradition. They're guardians of a lineage older than most Western nations. Their respect is not symbolic. It's operational. And within the royal family, there are subtle, unspoken tiers, even beyond official rank. For instance, guards often feel a deeper sense of duty to those royals who show gratitude, empathy, or kindness in everyday interactions. A small nod, a genuine thank you, a moment where a royal acknowledges that the guard is a human being, not just a fixture in uniform. And Kate. Well, Kate is famously known for noticing everyone. She notices the gardeners, the cooks, the cleaners, the drivers, the staff members who rarely appear in photos. And yes, the guards. She often smiles, greets them by name when she remembers, asks about their day, their families, their duties. Not out of obligation, out of genuine interest. Kate sees people. One former palace worker once said, "She doesn't look through you. She looks at you." Camilla, on the other hand, maintains a more formal, structured approach. It's not unkind, just distant. Her interactions are polite but brief, respectful but reserved. For some staff, that difference in warmth shapes their emotional perception of the royals, even if they never speak of it openly. So when Kate approaches Officer Hale, to her it was just another day of kindness. But to Hale, years of small moments add up. And in that instant, when instinct nudged him deeper into a bow, he didn't respond as a trained guard. He responded as a human being who felt genuine respect. But that's precisely why this moment mattered. Because guards are trained not to be human in those moments. Palace insiders know that any sign of personal preference can be interpreted politically. A guard's gesture carries weight. It's not just posture, it's messaging. And even if the guard didn't intend it, the palace must react to prevent misinterpretation, especially when a royal involved is Kate, arguably the most beloved figure in the monarchy today, and especially when the other royal involved is Camilla, who still carries the burden of public opinion even decades after joining the royal family. Behind closed doors, royal aides discussed the incident quietly, not angrily but with concern, because if one guard bows lower to Kate and someone sees it, the implications spread quickly. Does the palace staff favor Kate over Camilla? Is Camilla respected as much as her title requires? Does this reflect the internal atmosphere of the monarchy? That's the danger, not the bow itself, the interpretation. And inside the guard's code, perception is everything, because behind the scenes, the guard functions like a machine, precise, unified, elegant. One misstep, one variation, one hint of personal feeling can throw off the balance of the entire structure, which is why the guard's commanding officers met with Hale after the incident, not in punishment. He was too respectful for that, but in clarification. They needed to know if the bow was intentional. They needed to ensure consistency. They needed to protect the integrity of the monarchy's presentation. Hale kept his answer simple. It wasn't rebellion, he said. It was respect. And perhaps that single sentence revealed everything. Royal guards are trained to be symbols, not individuals. But sometimes individuals break through. Sometimes their humanity slips out. And this time, it slipped out in favor of a princess the world adores, and in front of a queen consort still fighting to secure her place. A tiny bow, a tiny moment, but in a world built on symbols, tiny moments can reshape perceptions, and the palace was already preparing for the ripple effect. The palace had survived decades of tension, rivalry, whispers, and reinvention. But nothing spreads faster through royal corridors in a moment that should have meant nothing, yet somehow means everything. And after Officer Hale's bow, the deeper one meant for Kate, the shallower one meant for Camilla, the entire royal machine found itself quietly rattling. Not publicly, not loudly, but internally, in the spaces where aides move like chess pieces and opinions are currency. The event landed like a silent meteor. At the center of it all were two women, two very different royal figures, whose paths have intertwined, overlapped, and occasionally collided in ways the public rarely sees. This is where the fuller story begins. This is where we understand why the guard's bow mattered and why the reaction behind closed doors was far more emotional than anyone imagined. When Kate entered the royal family, she did something very few had managed before her. She softened the palace, not because she tried to, but because she couldn't help it. Her warmth didn't feel forced. It felt lived. Her smiles weren't royal gestures. They were human moments. She noticed things other royals didn't always see. A guard's weary eyes after a long shift, a maid rushing by with a stack of linens, a young intern carrying documents with shaking hands, a gardener kneeling in the rain to trim hedges for an upcoming event. She saw them, every single one, and the staff noticed. One former palace worker once said quietly, "Kate is the kind of person who asks your name twice just to make sure she remembers." Another added, "She doesn't walk around like she's floating on status. She walks like she's part of the world." Even in moments when protocol demanded silence, Kate found ways to show humanity. A nod, a soft smile, a fleeting glance that said, "I know you're here. I appreciate you." Officer Hale had witnessed hundreds of these moments. He had stood guard, stone still, while Kate walked past with a warmth that made the palace feel less like a fortress and more like a home. And the truth was simple. He admired her, not in a scandalous way, not in a misplaced, forbidden way, but in the honest way a soldier admires a leader who sees people not as tools, but as humans. Kate had earned that deeper bow without ever asking for it. Camilla, a queen consort still fighting the shadows of yesterday. Camilla's story is different, more complicated, woven with decades of public perception, media storms, and history that will forever sit beside her name like a shadow she never chose but must always carry. Inside the palace, Camilla is respected, deeply, structurally, formally, but respect in a royal setting is different from affection. It's procedural, constitutional, required. Staff follow her lead. Advisors defer to her title. Guards bow to her rank. But affection? That comes from somewhere else. Warmth, approachability, emotional presence. Camilla, despite her efforts, never found it easy to connect with staff the way Kate naturally did. Her interactions were efficient, brief, focused. She appreciated the work done for her, but kept a certain distance. Perhaps because she had spent years being criticized by the public. Perhaps because vulnerability felt dangerous. Perhaps because she had learned the hard way that letting people in sometimes led to judgment rather than comfort. So when she saw Hale's bow, deeper for Kate, shallower for her, it struck her differently, not with anger, but with a quiet, sharp sting. Because Camilla wasn't just reacting to a bow. She was reacting to a lifetime of comparisons. The moment behind closed doors. After the incident, Camilla returned to her scheduled meeting, a briefing about upcoming engagements, but her posture had changed. Her usually firm, confident presence seemed just slightly offset, as if something small had lodged in her thoughts and wouldn't move. Her aide, Miss Fairley, noticed immediately. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" she asked lightly. Camilla paused. Not enough to alarm anyone, but enough to reveal the truth. "I'm fine," she replied, with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. But internally, she wasn't fine. She replayed the bow as she sat in her chair. She replayed it while reading documents. She replayed it while staff discussed schedules. She kept seeing Hale's deeper tilt toward Kate. In a world where every gesture carries meaning, Camilla had learned to read signals. Signals of loyalty, of respect, of alignment. And whether she wanted to admit it or not, that bow was a signal she couldn't ignore. Not because she blamed Hale, but because she understood exactly why he bowed that way. And that truth hurt more than the gesture itself. Kate's reaction. Compassion instead of naivety. Kate remained blissfully unaware of the incident at first. She had walked down the corridor thinking only about the meeting ahead, the school event she was planning, the charity she was preparing to support. She didn't notice the small drama behind her, but she heard about it later. A palace aide, gently, cautiously, brought it to her attention, not to stir conflict, but to keep her informed. "Ma'am," the aide said carefully, "there was a small protocol moment earlier with Officer Hale." Kate blinked softly. Protocol moment? The aide explained the bow, the deeper one for her, the shallower one for Camilla, the whispers, the tension, the quiet stir behind closed doors. Kate didn't gasp. She didn't laugh. She didn't react with shock. She simply frowned, the kind of frown she reserved for moments involving human discomfort. "Oh," she whispered, voice barely audible. She wasn't worried for herself. She was worried for Camilla, because Kate understood what it meant. She understood how these subtle signals could be interpreted. She understood that the palace was a pressure cooker, and even kindness could ignite unintended storms. "Has anyone spoken to Camilla?" Kate asked softly. "Yes, ma'am. Her team is aware." Kate lowered her gaze, thoughtful, not guilty. She hadn't done anything wrong, but concerned. The last thing she ever wanted was to make someone feel overshadowed, especially Camilla. Kate had always treated Camilla with respect. Genuine, gracious, consistent. She had never competed with her. She had never tried to outshine her. But Kate's warmth radiated naturally, and the public responded. Staff responded. Even the royal guards responded. Kate knew this wasn't really about a bow. It was about perception. It was about comparisons. It was about the difficult path Camilla had walked. And Kate felt the weight of that. Not because she caused it, but because she couldn't stop it. Behind the scenes, the palace tries to put out a fire without flames. A quiet meeting took place among senior palace aides. They didn't want a scandal. They didn't want tension between households. They didn't want rumors spreading beyond palace walls. Their solution was straightforward. No gossip. No disciplinary action. No overreaction. Just a gentle reminder issued to the guard division. Maintain uniformity in all official gestures. Simple, professional, clean. But the aides privately acknowledged something deeper. This wasn't a policy issue. This was a people issue. Kate was adored. Camilla was respected. And those two truths created friction, soft, invisible friction, that showed itself in moments like a guard's bow, Camilla's private reflection, pain behind Polish. Later that night, when the palace had settled into its quiet rhythm, Camilla sat in her private sitting room with a cup of tea. The day's schedule lay closed on the table. The lamps glowed softly. The world outside the windows was calm. But her thoughts were not. She wasn't angry with Hale. She wasn't angry with Kate. She wasn't even angry with the staff. She was simply tired. Tired of comparisons. Tired of shadows. Tired of feeling like she was still proving herself after all these years. She had fought hard to earn her place. She had supported the crown. She had stood by Charles. She had carved out her role with dedication. But moments like this reminded her that affection is not something a title can command. And that hurt. Still, she straightened her posture, took a breath, lifted her chin. She had lived long enough to understand that not every wow needs to be shown. Some could be carried quietly with dignity. Kate's quiet act of kindness. The next morning, Kate made a small, subtle choice. She visited Camilla's office, not formally, not announced, not as a scheduled briefing. She walked in with a soft knock and a warm smile. "Good morning," Kate said gently. Camilla looked up, momentarily surprised. "Catherine, what a nice surprise." Kate stepped inside with her calm presence, the kind that softened even the hardest corners of a room. They spoke briefly about upcoming engagements, about charities, about small things. But beneath the conversation, there was something else, a quiet offering, a gesture of solidarity, a reminder that Kate wasn't rising against Camilla. She was rising with her. Kate would never mention Hale. Camilla would never bring it up. But both women understood the purpose of that visit. It was Kate's bow, not with her head, but with her heart. And so the palace found its balance again, for now. Officer Hale continued his duties. Kate continued her work with her familiar grace. Camilla continued her role with renewed composure. The bow was never discussed publicly. No headlines, no scandals. Just a moment that lived inside the palace walls like a secret story whispered by marble floors. But those who witnessed it would never forget it, because royalty isn't defined only by crowns, jewels, or titles. It's defined by humanity, by how people feel, by the stories that unfold not in front of cameras, but in quiet hallways. And in that hallway, on that day, a royal guard revealed something true. Some royals earn respect because of tradition. Others earn it because of who they are. And Kate, simply by being herself, earned a bow that changed everything. That single sentence became a headline, and it hit the palace harder than the bow itself, because whether intentional or not, it implied something delicate, that Kate, through years of quiet consistency, had earned organic loyalty in places even the monarchy couldn't script, while Camilla, despite her position, still carried a weight of public opinion that no title could wash away. Inside Clarence's house, Camilla's team tried to contain it. They downplayed the moment, calling it a misinterpretation, an angle issue, a meaningless difference in posture. But each explanation only made the clip go more viral. Meanwhile, over at Kensington Palace, the atmosphere was noticeably calmer. Kate had seen the clip too, not because she sought it out. Someone on her staff gently mentioned it during her scheduled briefing. Kate had simply smiled, almost embarrassed. "That poor guard," she said softly. "He didn't mean it. He'll get unnecessary attention now." That was Kate's first instinct. Protect the guard, not herself, not her image, the guard. And that reaction alone would later be quoted by staffers as the most Kate-like thing imaginable. But even if she downplayed it, the palace couldn't, because the guard's bow had already become part of a larger conversation, one about Kate's natural rapport with the people around her, senior officials, assistants, drivers, and yes, even guards. Over the next few days, stories began surfacing from within palace walls. Not scandals, not drama, but tiny human moments. A guard remembered Kate bringing hot chocolate to sentries on a freezing December morning. Another spoke of her remembering names, even of those who'd only served brief rotations. A former may recall Kate picking up toys on the floor without a second thought, saying, "No need of fuss. I'm not royalty on the carpet." These stories spread not because palace PR pushed them, but because ordinary staff felt compelled to share. In contrast, Camilla faced a different narrative, one shaped by years of public scrutiny, skepticism, and a long road toward acceptance. She had made progress. Yes, she had built new respect. Yes, but acceptance and affection are not the same, and the guard's bow reminded the public of that gap in the simplest possible way. For a brief moment, palace insiders worried the story might escalate into an unnecessary rift between two royal households. But something unexpected happened. The guard requested a meeting, not with Camilla, not with the press office, with his commanding officer. His purpose? To clarify. He insisted the bow was not political, not intentional, not a statement. Sometimes, he explained, your body reacts to the person who makes you feel at ease. He described how Kate always asked about the guard's well-being, even on busy days, how she checked the temperatures during winter shifts, how she once whispered jokingly, "You must be melting," during a summer engagement. None of it made news, but the palace heard it, and it mattered. In the next internal briefing, an advisor said quietly, "It's not about protocol anymore. It's about perception. Kate inspires something real." Meanwhile, Camilla's staff gently advised her to ignore the situation. She did, publicly at least, but those around her noticed a subtle shift, a little quieter, a little more reserved. Not hurt, exactly, more resigned. One senior aide described it as, "Camilla understands she will always be respected. She also understands she may never be loved in the same way Kate is." And that's a hard truth of the position. But the palace needed unity, not silent rivalry. So a plan formed, a joint appearance. Kate and Camilla together at an upcoming charity event. Cameras, smiles, calm waters restored. The day arrived. Crowds filled the street. Banners waved. Reporters gathered. As the cars pulled up, the atmosphere shifted into something hopeful, like a quiet message that the monarchy wasn't divided by a bow. And then something small but powerful happened. When Kate stepped out of the car, the same guard from the viral clip was stationed at the entrance. He stood still, formal, controlled. Kate gave him a warm, gentle nod, and he, disciplined now, measured to the inch, returned a respectful, perfectly equal bow. But the moment Kate walked inside, hidden from cameras, she whispered lightly as she passed, "Are you feeling all right?" The guard, caught off guard by her question, answered softly, "Yes, ma'am. Thank you." Kate smiled. No cameras, no audience, no performance. Just a human moment with no witnesses, except one security camera and a palace hallway that had seen centuries of history. Camilla saw it too. She paused, watching the brief exchange from behind. And though her expression did not shift, those close to her said later she understood something quietly profound. Respect can be commanded, but affection must be earned. By the end of the event, the palace had regained its balance. The story slowly faded, replaced by fresher headlines and newer royal engagements. But the echo remained in the halls, whisper among staff and guards and attendants. Some members of the royal family were born into respect. Others shaped it with their actions. Kate belonged to the second category. And the guard's bow, though tiny, though brief, became a symbolic reminder that the heart of the monarchy isn't just held by tradition. Often, it's held by the kindness of the people inside it.